In this lesson, we're going to have a look at how to reduce friction. But first of all, let's remind ourselves of what friction is. We remember that friction is the opposition to the movement of one surface against another. Now, there are two ways in which we can reduce this friction. The first way is to reduce the area of contact between those two surfaces. So let's make a note of that. Reduce the contact area between the surfaces. Now, there's a very important invention that does just that, and that invention is the wheel. Now, why is the wheel such a good friction reducer, so to speak? It is, of course, circular, and the area of contact between the surface of a wheel and the ground is here always at a minimum. Okay, so you always have a very small area of contact, and that's what makes a wheel so useful for travelling across surfaces. Now, you might say, my bike wheel needs friction in order to grip the road, and of course you're right. We want the friction to be at a minimum, but we don't want it to be too small. Otherwise your bicycle wheel will just slip across the floor and you won't get anywhere. So bicycle tyres are made of rubber, which provides a good grip with the floor. And if we want to minimise the friction between the floor and the wheel, then what we'll do is we'll pump air into the tyre, and by increasing the pressure in the tyre, then you minimise the contact area here. Okay, so increasing the pressure helps to minimise that contact area. And that's just what racing cyclists will do to their tyres. They'll make sure they're pumped at really high pressures to minimise this contact area, so that the friction is at a minimum. Now, we don't only want to minimise friction between the tyre and the ground, but also in the moving parts of the bike. A very important part is this bit here, which really attaches the bike wheel to the frame of the bike, and this is called the wheel hub. Okay, here's an example. This is the wheel hub. And if you look inside a wheel hub, you will find that the axis of the wheel is supported to the bike by these things here, which are called bearings. These are little steel balls, all right, which move around in this groove here, are called bearings. All right. Again, you'll notice that they are spherical. Okay, and as with circular objects, spherical objects have a minimum point of contact between two fixed surfaces, and so bearings are very important in the world of engineering, where you have moving parts, where you have one surface, where you want one surface to move against another. They help to reduce the friction. Again, reducing contact area, whether it's the wheel of your bike or whether it's the bearings inside the hub which attach the wheel to the bike frame, then reducing the contact area is very important. Now, the second way in which we can reduce friction is to use lubrication or lubricants. For example, 3-in-1 oil. So if you imagine this diagram represents two surfaces. Well, when one surface moves against the other, as you can see here, the surfaces will interact, they will oppose each other, and they will produce heat, which is not what we want. Now, this could be happening, for example, between these bearings and the bearing housing. Right, now, one of the ways that we can reduce this friction is by using lubricant. So you take your bike oil like that, you put it into the wheel hub, then the oil then helps the bearings, right, move around the bearing housing. And if you look at this diagram here, what happens is then the bike oil goes between the two surfaces. All right, and it will help separate the surfaces and help the surfaces glide one over the other, and so reduce friction. So, just to summarise, there are two ways in which we can reduce the friction between two surfaces. The first way is to try and reduce the contact area. That's what a wheel does, and that's what bearings do. Okay? The second way is to use a lubricant, and that helps the surfaces to glide over each other without interacting, and so reducing the friction and the amount of heat produced.